Hello everyone and welcome back to another video. Today we're back doing another experimental snapshot and this is the second one. Now after this snapshot there will not be another one for a few weeks as most of the Mojang what the hell was that? The Mojang team are on vacation, and as they should, as they've put a lot of effort into these snapshots. So let's get straight into it. The first change is that biome placement is a bit smoother and less noisy, and fewer microbiomes are dotting around the terrain, because now that biomes are larger, it's just a bit more weird when you have little microbiomes everywhere. I've not found any personally myself, but you can find little patches. So say down here there might be a tiny little meadow or stuff like that. It's just one of many examples. Another change, which I actually asked for last week, and I'm so glad this is in, is a higher cloud level. It was at 128, which is all the way down here. This is where clouds used to be. Now you can see how that's really odd. If we go all the way up to 192, you can see they're above most biomes, which is perfect, because that is exactly what we needed. And look at this terrain. This is truly the cliffs what we expected. Just a simple change, nothing really drastic changing, is the renaming of old mountain biomes. So, extreme mountains have been changed back to extreme hills, and gravelly mountains have been changed back to gravelly hills, just so people aren't getting confused with the old names, with the new, I can't speak today, aren't getting confused with the old mountains with the new ones. So the next range we have is with beaches. So we have beaches. So beaches are now generally wider, and in certain places there's no beaches. So I don't actually have any here, but as you can see, there's no beaches. And why does this terrain look so odd? This looks really out of place. Yeah, a bit odd that. Interesting. Anyway, the next change is to do with mob spawning. So sheeps will now spawn in meadows, and there are more rabbits and less donkeys. Another change is that blue orchids no longer spawn in meadows, so they are once again exclusive to the swamp. And on the topic of swamps now generate in the correct places. So sometimes they might have spawned like in a hot desert, or they're just out of place. So the swamps are now happier. Another change is right next to us, and that is that ice spikes biomes are now back in the game, as well as eroded badlands, because they were not in the previous experimental snapshot. But they are a bit out of place, because this is an ice spikes biome, and I don't quite think this is where they're supposed to spawn. And if we go to this, now let's hope this gives me the example I want. These have also been generating not correctly, let's just say. Here we are. As you can see, it's kind of just floating. So the next change is that underground biomes now interfere with the surface much less. As I've been flying around this world, I'm seeing lots less major cave entrances, which is great. And another change is that these won't all exactly lead down to deep slate. because it was way too easy to get to diamond level. And on the topic of that, ore veins are now slightly larger, tried mixing those two words together, slightly larger and more frequent since very few people seem to find them in survival mode. Oh, look what we found. This is the biome I've not really found much of, and an example of the swamp. This is not a swamp actually, but another change that this brings us on to is that you can now find single trees on top of these biomes, which are called the meadow, and we very commonly spawn with a bee nest on top, which is quite cool. And as well on the topic of mountains, mountains can now reach between 220 and 260. Now I've not quite found any there, the highest I've found is around 200. But just be aware they can spawn that high now, which is above the previous max build limit, which is just insane. A weird one, which I expected to already be there, is that monsters can now spawn in the new mountain biomes. But what's even weirder is that you have skeletons on the snowy ones instead of strays, which hopefully they might address and sort that out, because it is a snowy place. Next up is structures now spawn in the correct place in the world. Great example, this village, I don't know, might have spawned on a mountain or something. Somehow, wasn't in the right place. Back to the caves, is that cheese caves are now a bit smaller on average, although they still can be absolutely huge, but they're also a bit less likely to intersect with the surface. Next up is to improve performance of the game, is that inside of caves or stuff like that, sand and gravel is very much less likely to spawn somewhere where they'll fall. That just improves performance, but it still can happen, but just not as often. Zombie, skeleton, spider and cave spider spawners now only require a light level of 11 to spawn. That's only from a mob spawner, and the reason they've done this is because mob spawners have never been a challenge. And with complete darkness, that's gonna mean less of a challenge. If you have lava, a glow icon, a single torch, then it's all going. Now, but before you get mad about that, say it might be difficult to make a farm, well, it now has a custom spawn rules tag which lets you override the spawn rules of the mob, which basically lets you specify the block light limit and stuff like that. So that makes map makers, or if you're on a server and want to make a farming easier, that's the way to do it. And that is all the changes for today. If you want to know how to install this data pack, you do the exact same process as last time. If you didn't see the last experimental snapshot, that'll be in the description somewhere, probably at the very top, or in the pinned comment. And in there, on that comment or in the description, it'll tell you which timestamp to go to watch that. Before we go, a few known issues is that opening a world from Experimental Snapshot 1 causes an error, so you will need to create a new world for the snapshot. Next up, low performance, but they are working on the optimization for the normal snapshots, non-experimental ones. The nether terrain is messed up, which we're actually going to check out in a moment. End pillars don't generate, but they do generate when you respawn the ender dragon. Red sand is hard to obtain because badlands are mostly generated on plateaus rather than the flat terrain because of the changes. And aquifers sometimes break coastlines in an ugly way. And no, I'm not really sure what that is. A few changes compared to number 1 is new world height and depth, new mountains, lofty peaks, snow-capped grove meadow and snowy slopes, new cave generation, cheese, spaghetti and noodle, local water levels and lava levels, new cave biomes generate naturally underground and inside mountains, natural variation in terrain shape and elevation, and independently from biomes, for example forests and deserts could form up on a hill without needing a special biome just for that. New ore distribution, you can check the chart on the website, large ore veins, integrated mountains, caves and cave entrances, and monsters spawning in complete darkness. And that's compared to part 1 of the snapshot. Oh, well, little update thing. And that is all for today. So I hope you all enjoyed, and I'll see you all in the next episode.